Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina, and my guest today, I actually want to share with you before I introduce you a very funny story of how we've met. So the year was 2022, and I came to Rhinebeck, and the first person I saw was Louis Boria, who was a guest of my channel, and he was talking to somebody, but I wanted just to say quick hello. So I came and I hugged him, and he turned around, he looked at me, and he turned around back, and he told to the woman that he was talking to, "Oh my God, you have to be interviewed by her. She's asking follow-up best questions." And I was like, "Oh my God, thank you." And we chatted for a bit. And then 4 hours later, I'm still at the festival and I see Olga Jazzy is talking to somebody, and I came to say hello to Olga Jazzy, and I see the same person talking to Olga Jazzy, and Olga turns around, turns back and goes, "You have to be interviewed by Irina." And of course it was Jeanette Sloan. So it took us a couple years to actually coordinate this interview, but
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we finally found time. And please welcome to my channel.
Oh, thank you for asking me, and thank you for that. Do you know I'd completely forgotten that's how we met because it
How
just
do we,
seems like
yeah.
so long ago. And thank you for your patience because it's taken a while to actually kind of get to us doing this.
Right.
So thank you.
No, it's my pleasure. And actually, I've been sort of watching you over the years before we even met, right? I knew of you, we haven't been introduced, but I saw you on Instagram, and I saw all the books that you were writing and the patterns you were publishing. So I was an admirer at that point already. So it was just
Thank
so
you.
lovely to get to meet you in person and chat with
Yeah,
you there.
absolutely.
Well, you have been so busy over the
Yeah.
years. And I want to talk about how it all started. When did fiber arts, when did it enter your life?
So I have always been a textile designer. So I did textiles at university back in 30, is it now 36 years ago? Can't be. Yeah, when I was 20, yeah. So although I've just given away my age. So
Oh, we are right there, so together. So
so it's always been my job.
right.
I studied it at university. I learned to knit when I was very young, when I was 7, but it wasn't something that I was conscious that was on my radar as something that I would end up doing as a job. I always knew I'd do something creative, but I didn't quite think that it was going to be, this, which kind of is the dream job, really. If you like us, what you love is creating and you love fiber, so it is the dream job.
Well, what you also, besides being a designer, you also do a lot of teaching.
Mm.
How did you decide to go into teaching? Was it difficult at all? Did you, or coming out of university, being a professional, it's sort of the natural extension to go into teaching?
Yeah, it kind of grew out of that, really. So after I'd done my initial training, so I did a diploma, then I did a degree, then I actually went into education, higher education, not as a tutor, as a technician. And I always loved that job because it was really working very closely with students and helping them translate their ideas into actual finished garments or finished projects. So, and I love that technical aspect of it. And at the time, I was doing lots of machine knitting. So, although I'd hand knitted when I was a kid, and I kind of kept that up when I was studying, for the first probably 20 years of my professional career, I was predominantly a machine knitter with hand knitting on the side. So, I used domestic knitting machines and sort of semi-industrial machines as well. So, I kind of guess the teaching that I do now grew out of having worked for 9 years in education as a technician. So it kind of grew out of that, really. But
Well,
it's something that I love.
you dabble in a lot of different fiber arts. So there is machine knitting, there is, I mean, we talked a little bit, we touched on your new passion for upholstery, but you do sewing, you do a lot of different things. Um, when it comes to knitting, I see more and more people combining different crafts, right? So you see some crocheted cardigans with some knitting trim, or knitted shawls with crochet borders and stuff like that. Are you tempted to combine different fiber crafts in your designs?
That's actually how I started kind of bringing my hand knits into the things that I was producing at university. I would hand knit edges and then put them onto a knitting machine and knit up from them. So I've always kind of done that, or as you say, use a crocheted edge on something. So I'm absolutely for that. I really embrace that, you know, that sort of multi-skilled craft approach to something. I think it makes things much more interesting. I think it's very close to think that actually if you're a knitter, you're not a crochet, and if you're a crochet, you can't do this. We can do it all, and that's what makes it much more kind of inspirational and exciting.
Well, do you, as a teacher, right? Like I notice a lot of people who are knitters, for example, will shy away from anything else, right? And even certain techniques in knitting have this horrible reputation of like, oh, you see intarsia, just run, right? You love all these techniques. How do you convince people to be free with the, you know, fabric they create and try different sets of skill and not be afraid of certain things that they don't know?
You know what I say to them, and actually I had a chat when we were having lunch yesterday when I was doing my upholstery course, and a couple of the ladies on the course are knitters. And we had this conversation about one of them doesn't knit tension swatches, and then the other one said, "Oh, I don't do this." And I said, "You know what? If I can do it, you can do it." And that's what I say to people when I'm teaching. And it's not it's true, because you know we all start somewhere, and people often say, "Oh, well, I can knit, or I used to knit, but I can only knit and purl." It's like, well, do you know what? That's the key. We all have to start there. That's the basis for everything. And so it's absolutely true that if I can do it, you can do it. I think it's having that approach where you're open to doing something. And as you say, there are some techniques that just scare the life out of people. And you were talking about brioche earlier, and I have to say, my stomach tensed up because I love the look of it, but it's just too much for my brain to kind of constantly be going Burke, Burke, Burke. I can't be doing with it. So yeah, I just think to actively embrace that approach to learning where everyone's got to start from the same base level, because we all do. And I just think that's the key to it. And also making sure that people don't get into this mindset of thinking I'm doing it wrong. I'm knitting the wrong way. Another thing we were talking about yesterday was how we hold the yarns and how we hold the needles. And you know, I do it wrong. It's like, well, no, you don't. You just do it your way. And I think that's a lovely way of encouraging people to just get rid of any preconceptions they might have about being judged when they're trying to learn something, and just letting them be free with it.
Right, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because I'm, as a combination continental knitter, I'm getting like, oh, you're doing it wrong all the time. There was actually like a thread on Reddit where somebody was like, not only she's doing it wrong, she's being sour about like talking about her twisted stitches, something like this. And the thing is, like, when I was just started knitting, I did not really understand the anatomy of stitches and how they're supposed to look. And then once people start telling me, oh, you're doing it wrong, that's what sparked my curiosity about seeing, like, am I really doing it wrong, or am I just doing it differently? And it forced me to learn about like the positioning of the stitches, understanding the fabric. And the same comes with brioche, right? Brioche is very easy. The only difficult thing is about brioche is when you have to fix something. And then to be able to fix whether lace or brioche, you have to understand the fabric that you read. And the funny part, like I was just teaching my very first class on beginner lace at my local knitting guild. And I was telling there's like ladies who knit there for 50, 60 years, like all their lives, right? And they're like, oh, I don't do charts. And I had this analogy. I said, listen, when you first learn how to read, you learn to see the letter, and you learn to recognize the letter, and then you learn to know the sound of that the letter makes, and then eventually you add two sounds together, and then at some point you can just glance and you see the word. You don't have to sound out every letter. And with charts is the same thing. Like you look at charts and you recognize familiar patterns, so you don't have to like sit there and read the knitting instructions like letter by letter, so to say. And I find like the more people are open to like instigating and seeing like what makes this fabric look like it is, the easier it is becomes to fix things and experiment with things and use different techniques.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of kind of trying to introduce people to charts, because I've found that with some people just like that, I've knitted for years and I don't do charts. Like, oh, okay, you know, and as you say, why not? And so that's a really lovely way of kind of like getting them to think differently about it. It's brilliant. I will, if I use it, I'll quote you.
That's what I love chatting about, is like people from the industry, because we all start quoting each other, right? Like
Yeah.
we all find something like the way you say it. Well, one of the things I was the most impressed with was when you were invited to Buckingham Palace. So
Oh,
tell me a little bit before we start talking about that specific day, and I want to know some details of how it felt to be there and to wear that beautiful outfit you were wearing and all of that thing. Tell me like what preceded that invitation.
so for anyone who isn't aware, because we have a monarchy in this country, there is a thing, such a thing as the New Year and birthday honours lists, and they come out twice a year. But basically, people are recommended for certain honours, and there are different levels of them. For it may be that they've done a lot of work for charity, or sometimes actors get them for outstanding in their field. And I was nominated for services to knitwear and promoting diversity in the fibre arts. The interesting thing is that although you only get a phone call when they're just about to be announced, you don't know about it. So, you know, this, what you get is this letter from the Cabinet Office. That's the word I was trying to think of. Because this letter from the Cabinet turns up, the Cabinet Office turns up, and it's got this really beautiful insignia on it, and it's on this really lovely, high quality, you know, stationery. And you open it up, and it kind of says you are invited to accept this award, but you don't know who's nominated you, which is really interesting. And the process can take 3 years. So I got my award, was it last year? I think it was. So that would have been 2020 that I was nominated. And so there is a bit of controversy, I guess, about it, because some people kind of feel that it smacks of colonialism. And so I guess specifically being a Black knitwear designer and being the child of people who came over in the Windrush generation, which was at the end of the 50s and 60s, there were some people who, you know, take a political stance and won't accept an award because it smacks of colonialism. But I very much wanted to accept it because I knew that my mum and my dad would have been really, really proud. And they were, you know, proud Barbadians who came to this country and worked really, really hard to help rebuild the country at the end of the Second World War. And also, they were both really, really creative people. My mum taught me to knit. She could sew, she could tat, she could crochet. My dad used to make shoes. He was a carpenter as well and a trained electrician. And so, what I do now is a real celebration of all those gifts that my parents gave to me. So I decided that I would accept it. So you get, I should have brought it out actually, because you actually get like a little medal. It's amazing. So it was a British Empire medal. So you actually get a medal, which is kind of bizarre, really. And I'll show you it. It comes in a beautiful red box that's got British Empire medal written on it. And it looks like that.
You know what? I'm sure your parents would have been very proud, but like my heart is just bursts with pride.
You know what? It's really weird. It's really weird because I haven't looked at it for ages. In fact, I probably haven't looked at it since I put it in the drawer, but I've just got butterflies in my stomach because I just thought my mum would have been beside herself. So my sister also got an award the year before. So she got an MBE, which is kind of slightly higher up in the rankings. And we also tease each other because she got her medal from Prince Charles, now King Charles, at Windsor Castle. And I couldn't go into the actual ceremony, but I went with her to Windsor and we all got dressed up. So she got hers, better medal from who is now the king, and I got mine from a Lord Lieutenant of East Sussex, where I used to live. But once you get, once you're given an award, you then are nominated to be invited to a garden party at Buckingham Palace, which is how my sister and I ended up at Buckingham Palace, which is bizarre because it's a building that, you know, so many of us are aware of, and if you're in central London, you pass it, but
Well,
you
you
never
only
think
see it
you're
through
gonna,
the gates, basically.
exactly, you never think you're going to go inside. So I didn't go into the palace itself, but you kind of you go to the back of the palace. So two ways that you can get in, and then there's this massive queue of people all dolled up, all waiting to get into Buckingham Palace. And you have to wait for quite a while, and then you have to go through a police checkpoint, and the police are there with guns, and you have to have your official, whatever it is, the pass thing, and then you have to have your passport. And then you walk in, and there's just the most beautiful grounds. The grounds are stunning, really stunning. It was really surreal, really surreal. And all my sister and I kept thinking was, and saying was, Mum would have just been beside herself. She would have giggled so much. Our mum died in 2020, unfortunately. But she would have just loved it because she loved the Queen and she loved Prince Charles, now King Charles. So yeah, the day just seemed to go in a complete blur, and we just kept going, can't believe we're here. So we went in the back entrance, but when we left at the end of the garden party, we walked out the front gate, which is even more bizarre because there's loads of people standing there taking photographs of Buckingham Palace, and then they realise they're taking photographs of you, which honestly, it was so good. I loved it, absolutely loved it. A once in a lifetime opportunity.
Right. Well, let's talk about what you got that medal for, because you have been very vocal and very active in talking about BIPOC community in knitting specifically. Tell me a little bit more about how it started and about it.
So that it's kind of quite not complicated, but it's kind of quite a kind of roundabout story. So back in, I think it would have been 2018, I met Lorna Hamilton Brown, who is a textile artist. And she's a British-based textile artist, black, and she had been studying at the Royal College of Art in London. And we were kind of introduced through a friend, Freddie Robbins, because Lorna had been to a knitting symposium called In the Loop, and she was knitting, and she had remarked that there weren't a lot of black people there, and somebody had said to her, well, that's because black people don't knit, they crochet. And Lorna's standing there knitting and thinking, well, do you know what, that's a load of old rubbish. So that kind of, sort of stereotyping of who does what craft, and
Right.
that kind of, microaggression kind of racism also, because you just kind of think, well, that's a ridiculous thing to say. So that got Lorna, one, irritated, and two, inspired, and it got her thinking. So she kind of went back. So she decided that she was going to write her dissertation in response to this, this myth that black people don't knit, they crochet. So then she was tasked to find a black knitwear designer, and she realized that she didn't know of any, apart from her tutor, Freddie Robbins, who I'd previously worked with when I worked as a technician, had said to her, contact Jeanette Sloan. So that's how Lorna and I became friends.
Right.
And it was just something that I was, of course, aware of, because even when I was back at university, I think I was the only black person on my course, but it wasn't something that necessarily, I noticed it, but I wasn't made to feel unwelcome. But it was just one of those things where I was just thinking, well, this is interesting, and that kind of, not marginalization so much as, but that novelty, I guess, in the loosest sense of the word, continued for years. So I didn't meet that many other black or BIPOC working in my field, but it was always something that I was aware of, but not something I ever talked about. And then, of course, in the wake of the George Floyd murder, there was a lot of talk about lack of BIPOC representation across a lot of fields. And Lorna had published her dissertation, and we had been talking about it, ongoing from the point that we'd met. And so I just put up a post on Instagram saying, well, how many black knitwear designers do you know? And I got a big response. But also what was interesting was I got a response from other people of other ethnicities who
Right.
said, well, actually, if you think you're underrepresented, you know, we are too. So they were Indigenous people and people of Southeast Asian heritage. And I just thought, this is such an odd thing. It's 2019, 2018, 2019. How is this still a thing? And so that's really how it kind of took off. And at the time, I was working for a magazine called Knitting, which was published in the UK. And I mentioned to my editor that this conversation was happening online, and she'd said, "Do you want to write about it?" And I just went, "Yeah, I guess I do." So that's how I started. And the first couple of articles that I wrote were published.
Right.
And it took off from there, really.
And at the same time, you established at some point BIPOC and fibre, right?
Yes, so BIPOC and fibre grew out of these ongoing conversations. What I'd initially done was, after I'd had all those responses on Instagram, I basically put together a list that I'd called the People of Colour and Designers Crafters list. And so the POC designers and crafters list, and I put it on my blog because I just thought this is an easy way of people being able to access makers and businesses that they couldn't find anywhere else. And then I got a really interesting message from a lady called Alison Chu through Ravelry. And Alison and I had never met. She happened to live up in Edinburgh, and she's Chinese American. And she just said, if you ever want to do anything with all of this stuff, then I'm quite good with data. So that's actually how BIPOC and Fibre started, because Alison got in contact. So I think if she hadn't, it would still just be a random list of people on my blog. But Alison helped, really did help to shape this into an interactive directory, which is what it is now. And although in this country the acronyms are not ideal, I understand that. So a lot of people don't like the acronym BIPOC because they think it's too restrictive or it's too much of a label. But for the purposes of focusing people's attention, it was useful. And also I wanted to use it because I think POC is kind of vague, and BIPOC is just, it kind of, for me, I wanted people to feel that it wasn't something that was restricted to the UK. I wanted it to feel much more global than that, because it is a global directory, although Alice and I are both based in the UK. So that's why we came up with the name BIPOC in Fibre, and the website launched, I think, in 2020. My memory is so vague. So yes.
Did you meet a lot of new BIPOC creators through this initiative?
A lot, a lot. And so it's, unfortunately, it's kind of, the website is still live. It's kind of had to take a bit of a sidestep because lots of things have happened on a personal front for me. So unfortunately, I haven't been able to kind of devote as much time to it, but we are still actively looking for people to submit to it. There is a submission form on it. And that's not because it's exclusive in any way. The only prerequisite is that you are Black, Indigenous, or a person of colour, and you run a fibre business. It just means that, we have to just gather the information. But yeah, I've met loads, both online and in person, which is fantastic. So when I kind of go to things like Vogue Knitting or to Unravel or to the Scottish Yarn Festival, I meet people all the time. And it's really lovely that even people who are non-BIPOC have said, I found so-and-so because of the directory. And that's fantastic, because that's what it's about. It's not exclusive in that it's only for BIPOC people to use. It's for everyone to use. And I want everyone to do that.
Well, let's talk about your writing, because you published a whole bunch of books. And you are a regular correspondent in Line magazine, which is one of my favorite publications. I really like the style, the aesthetic of it. So tell me a little bit about your writing career, so to say.
So that started with the UK knitting magazine that I mentioned, Knitting. So I was agony yarn, I guess you'd call it, for that magazine for around 10 years. So they had an Ask Jeanette column, and I would get sent questions, anybody's kind of questions about knitting, mostly knitting actually, I guess, because it's a knitting magazine. So I did that for 10 years, and then I gradually started doing other things. So I would do kind of like step-by-step tutorials for the magazines. I used to write the yarn reviews. And gradually, I guess my name was getting out there. So I was invited to write a piece for Vogue Knitting magazine on the Shetland-based designer Nina Nell. And then I one day I just suddenly got an email from Yona at Liner, the editor, who was then editor-in-chief at Liner magazine. And as you say, it's one of my favorite magazines. And I was so gobsmacked when I got the email. I actually shut my computer. I just kind of shut it down and then just went, because I just couldn't believe it. So yes, I've been working for them for probably about the past 4 years, I think it is now, and I've done freelance writing for a number of other publications as well.
Well, when you
Um,
write a column for Lina, is it your idea that you pitch to them, or do they give you, or the readers give you some ideas of what you can write about?
Initially, it was I had absolute carte blanche to write wherever I wanted to. So I did that initially. And then we came up with the idea of a column or a piece that would actually shine a little spotlight on people that you wouldn't necessarily know about who have an ethnically diverse background. So a little bit sort of leading off the work that I was doing with BIPOC in fibre. So that's what I do now. I write a piece, a regular feature called Fibre Talk, and it basically is like a really kind of concentrated little interview with people who are ethnically diverse who work in fibre, and not necessarily all knitting. That they're really diverse in terms of what they do as well as who they are.
Right. Well, talking about being diverse in what you do, how do you manage to balance it all? Because you do it all.
I'm not sure I do balance it, Arena. There were days like this I just think, why am I so tired? But I really do love what I do. I guess part of it also is that I've had quite a few life changes in the last couple of years. So um, doing lots of work means that I'm always doing something. My brain is always working. So whether or not my hands are doing something, my brain is always firing. So in the last couple of years, my life situation has changed quite a bit, and my husband passed away. And so I kind of reevaluated how my approach to life and my approach to working. So as well as doing the knitting that I do and the writing that I do for work, I wanted just to embrace lots of other things and lots of other creative passions that perhaps I wouldn't get the chance to do. So it's about that, but I'm much more mindful of trying to um, make a real division between what feels like work and what I really want to be doing. So I guess a balance of what I have to do and what I want to do. And there needs to be more of what I want to do.
Well, talking about the upholstery, where does that fall in that spectrum?
That's kind of, I can, so having moved house, this is the first time I've ever bought a house by myself and ever lived by myself. And so I thought I wanted to just try and imbue it with a bit more of me, because the house that I used to live in with my husband was quite masculine. My husband was a photographer, and so he would gather a lot of stuff that you wouldn't necessarily see in a normal house, because we actually used to live in his studio. So that's part of the process of making this new house much more about me as a woman, rather, and me as a woman in my later years who's living as a widow. But I wanted to just kind of bring a little bit more joy to it. So I went and got myself a chair have you seen those beautiful kind of like low slipper chairs that kind of almost have for some reason, I just decided that I'd like to have one of those in my new bedroom. So I Googled and I found one. And then I thought I'd like to get my friend to upholster it. So my best friend lives in Scotland and she does upholstery. But logistically, it didn't make sense to try and send it up to her. And so she said, why don't you do it yourself? So that's how the upholstery came about, really.
So, okay, walk me through that first chair. Was that easy and obvious and intuitive for you, or?
So it's ongoing. So the first thing I did, thankfully, I don't know how, it's like the stars are aligned. So I live in a part of Bristol where there's literally an upholstery company, or it's called the Bristol Upholstery Collective, and it's literally 6 minutes around the corner. It's like, this is just, this is meant to be. But what was really encouraging was on their website, they said, if you think you've got a project you'd like to do, the best thing to do is start with something small. So I had started by doing a footstool course over 2 days, and that hooked me instantly. And I just thought, yeah, I really need to do the chair. I want to do the chair myself. And so that led me on to doing the chair, which is literally ongoing. So I booked myself onto a 6-week course, and I had day 2 yesterday, and I'm surprised at how much progress I've made and how much you're learning. Every single process is a learning process, because everyone's project is lovely. It's about 6 of us on the course, but we're all doing different projects. So we all have different skills to learn,
Right.
that are specific to the project that we're doing. So it's fascinating. But I'm thinking, okay, I want to rip the back off the sofa and reupholster that. I've got a footstool, reupholster that. I've got a like a tall poof that I want to put in my dressing room. So already I'm stacking up projects, and there's yarn in there that can't be employed in this process at the moment. So now I'm buying fabric, which is just, but for specific projects. I'm trying to be focused. And in my head, I can hear my husband going, how much more stuff are you going to bring into the house? But it makes me feel so happy. It really does. I am happiest when I am making. And actually, it doesn't really matter what I'm making. As long as I am doing that process of creating something, my heart is happy.
Well, if you run out of the projects to do in your house, you're more than welcome to come to my house. All the furniture is yours for.
Oh, okay. That I'll take you up on that, because I've just bought I bought some tools from a retired professional upholsterer. I've just bought a tool bag that's actually got wheels, so I can come like a flight attendant with my tools, my upholstery tools. And when I get there, it looks good. When I get there, I'll probably just think I'm really not quite sure what I'm doing. But yeah, I'll show willing.
Jeanette, you see that door? That's the guest bedroom, so it's yours for the taking.
Fantastic.
Well, when you're not creating something, what else brings you joy in life?
Cooking. I love cooking. The one thing I did find, that after my husband died, my cooking really I wasn't interested in it, because we were real foodies. And there's a standing joke in my family, particularly with my sister, that we would eat a meal and then instantly the first question we would say is, what do you want for dinner? Or what do you want for the next meal? So I lost my cooking mojo quite a bit, because it was quite a change to cook for 2 people who ate like 4 people, and then start cooking for 1. But I've kind of got that back. And it's lovely, because since I've moved, my sister literally lives around the corner, so I cook for her. And I don't read as much as I should, although I bought so many books that I'm just thinking, one day when I have the time, but I'm really into audiobooks at the moment. So the making is great, because it just allows me to just listen to books while I'm doing whatever it is that I'm making. But
yeah,
yeah.
I was a hardcore real book for years. Like when Kindle came, I was like, not for me. And now somehow the audiobooks became my best friend. Like I can knit and listen to audiobook. I can cook and listen to the audiobook. So it's became like my go-to format somehow.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah,
course, some people read it much better than others, but that's whole other talk.
Yeah. I guess the bad habit I have got into, though, is watching television in my bed, which, they say you're not supposed to take screens in the bedroom because it stimulates. So what I'm trying to do now is take a book to bed. But what I guess, being of a certain age, I've got varifocals. So I'm kind of trying to do this and trying to read, and it just isn't happening. Just isn't happening. But audiobooks, I'm listening at the moment to, what is her name? The book is called The Housemaid. I'm just going to look it up, because these titles are so good. Frida McFadden. So I started listening to The Housemaid by Frida McFadden, and it's the first audiobook I've ever gone, I've got to keep listening to this. You know, when you've got like a real page turner, it's so good.
I said,
So,
I'm gonna add that to my reading list.
oh, you honestly, you have to. It is kind of, it's dark. And I like my kind of fiction dark. So it is utterly brilliant. So when I was driving up to Scotland for the Scottish Yarn Festival a couple of weeks ago, I was listening. I'd finished listening to that. I was like, download the next one. It is so good. But I've never been not so sure about a Kindle. I think I spend too much time on screens anyway, and I worry that the screens trigger migraine. So I like the, you know, the texture of having a book in my hand. If I'm going to read, I'd rather read from an actual book than read from a digital book. I mean,
Well, the only
when I'm
reason
knitting, I still print my patterns as well because I like to have a, you know, that
I
tangible.
do too. I
Oh,
like my patterns printed out, and I like putting sticker tape to show me what row I'm working on. Some I don't know.
yeah.
Like I mean, I have iPad and everything. I could have done it there, but somehow this is like it brings me more joy to look on the printed page.
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it? Where you can actually tick something off or move the tape. There is that. Yeah, I love that.
So, what's in the works for this year and maybe even next year?
What's on the work? So, I am what's immediate. There's a lot going on. Literally, as you could see, the to-do list that's sitting here in front of me. So, I have recently taken part in a TV program, which airs on the BBC later this year. It's called Make It at Market. And the sort of premise of the show is that there are a number of amateurs looking to turn their crafting into a business, and then each of them is matched with a mentor. And this is the first year or the first season that they've done fibre crafts. So I felt a little bit out of my comfort zone initially because they said, "Oh, we're going to get some knitters in," and then they said, "Oh, we've got 2 crocheters for you," and I was like, "Oh." So, but you know, the stuff. What was really nice is that actually a lot of the stuff that I've kind of pointed them towards is transferable. So I've done 3 days of filming now. That's being edited, and that comes out just before Christmas, I think it is. So that'll be interesting to see. Although I have a feeling I'm not going to like the way I look on screen. But you know, that's
It's
fine.
it's all this stuff. Like it's to look at back at yourself on the screen. You always like we're always more critical of ourselves than the audience, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So I might watch it once and then I may never see it again. But it's fine. And I really enjoyed the process, and it was lovely working with the 2 women, Tiana and Louise. I loved it. I just, you know, I love the whole process, and the production team was great. What else am I doing? I've just actually done collaborated on a collection with a UK-based retailer called Hobbycraft. So I've got 4 designs that will be launched later this year, and I'm very excited about that. I think people will be surprised because, you know, you kind of, I guess as a designer, I've worked with some amazing yarn producers and yarn companies that are, you know, beautiful hand spun yarns or hand dyed yarns. And this is your kind of regular mass produced yarn, which is, you know, absolutely fine because not everybody can afford a 20-25 pound a hank yarn. So this is the interesting collaboration. So I've got the photo shoot with them in a couple of weeks. And so yeah, that's in the kind of final stages at the moment. What else? I'm about to teach at the Knitting Hotel, teaching a retreat at the Knitting Hotel in Dawlish in Devon. That's in November. And I have a book to work on. So let's just say I'm very excited to be writing a book of patterns that explore my beloved beaded colorwork technique. So I'm really excited about that. And that I think that comes out at the end of next year.
Right. That's going to be a very busy year for you. And I'm so glad that we found time to sit down and chit chat and get to know each other a little bit better.
Yeah, me too.
And I hope you're going to come to one of the American festivals. So maybe I'm going to, my New Year resolution for next year is to start going to more European festivals. So I'm hoping I'm going to catch you somewhere there. And
Oh, I hope so. So to celebrate us finally getting to chat, there's going to be a special promotional code for your followers, and I guess you're going to put that up in the show notes.
Yeah, thank you so very much. I'm going to put it in the description of this video. So guys, check out the promo code, use it, and of course, give Jeanette a follow on Instagram or everywhere you are on social media. Thank you so very much, Jeanette. Thank you for being my guest today. It was lovely to chat with you.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad we finally got to do it. Thanks ever so much, Irina. It's been a pleasure.